to our next speaker, who's going to speak on the topic of leading with a purpose. And our next speaker is Simon Bolger. Simon graduated from Dublin City University and University of London. He leads the Europe, Middle East and Africa online partnership groups at Google. These teams work with hundreds of thousands of publishers across the world to support, manage and grow partnerships. Previously, he was EMEA and Global Lead for AdSense account management teams who work with Google strategic partners. He was also involved with founding and working at a number of startups in the media and online industries, as well as leading digital radio strategy and development for RTE. Simon is going to speak on leading with the purpose, which is, I think, an excellent connection to where we started. Ladies and gentlemen, Simon Bolger.
Thank you, McDarren. Thank you for inviting me to speak here today. I think I'm going to learn something about leadership. That's great. Just following on from something that McDarren said, and then Mary also touched on, about all of you being leaders. I couldn't agree more with that. The thing is, though, at the time, sometimes you don't realize that you're a leader, particularly as you're sort of entering that journey of leadership. I had this experience myself when I got my first job out of college, which was to join RTE and lead their digital radio strategy. So my job was to develop the strategy to bring digital radio to Ireland and set up the first digital radio broadcast for RTE, which meant I had to work with stakeholders in government departments, regulators, had to work with other radio stations, and often I was, no, not often, I think always, I was the youngest person in the room at like 22, 23 years of age, trying to convince these folks that this was the way forward. I didn't have a formal leadership role or title or anything like that, but I did have to earn the right to lead. And do that through credibility, and I had that because I was the expert, I was the expert in the area. I was probably one of the top experts in Europe at the time on that subject. But I had very little awareness about how I was leading. I couldn't say I had much purpose to my leadership. These are all things that I learned later on through making lots of mistakes. And I think leadership is a bit about making mistakes and learning from them. Once you learn from them, it's okay. So I want to talk to you about those three areas. It's kind of getting the basics of leadership right, and practicing the basics, developing your awareness about how you're leading, and then building your purpose, your intention, and how you want to lead. And the first piece of that, I think, is earning the right to lead. And this could look like knowing your team, knowing your processes, knowing your products, whatever it is, knowing your area. You really need to work every day to know your area and earn that credibility and earn the right to lead. And this is something you can't just take for granted. Even if your title is as a leader, you still have to, every day, earn that right to lead. And how this looks for me, how it looked in RTE, I told you, as kind of the expert. But in Google, I'm not the expert. Everybody else there is smarter than me, I'm pretty sure of that. They know more about their areas than me. So I can't lead by being that expert. I can't lead by being in that mode that I used to lead in. I have to lead by helping them connect their area to the bigger picture, by helping them see the way forward, by helping them get there, by coaching them to get there, and that's part of leadership as well. One thing, though, as a leader that you need to have is a view of the future. So you've earned that right to lead, you have the credibility, and then you build that view of the future, which is also called having vision. Wrong order here. Which is also called having a vision for the future. This should be something that's compelling. It should be something that people aspire to, like as Mary was talking about. You need people to be able to connect to it. Tell the story. How does it feel? How does it look when they get there? If you have a vision for the future, people will know what they're aiming for. And then you can help them figure out how to get there. But sometimes you have to step back and not be the one who's always leading, even if you're formally the designated leader. It's not a good idea to always try to be the leader. You need to listen to your team, listen to the group around you, encourage debate, be okay with having other people form that vision for you. There's a saying that none of us is as smart as all of us. And it's true when it comes to decision making. Often it's good to get a lot of input, a lot of data, so you can make the best decision on the way forward. But doing that, I think, knowing when to lead and when to follow, takes awareness about how you're acting, how the group is reacting, and what your position is in it. And the first part of that, I think, is to be present. And that means it's easy to sort of be distracted day to day and not really be in the moment. But being present means paying attention to yourself, paying attention to the chatter that's going on in your head, and try to be in the right mode, the right frame of mind as you're entering a leadership situation. For example, I might be coming out of a situation as it was this morning where I'm kind of frustrated, things weren't going the way I wanted them to go, but the next situation I had to go into in about 1 minute's time, I had to be open, I had to be engaged, I had to be helping people see where they were going. So I consciously had to say to myself, be that way. Leave that at the door, and as you go into this next situation, be that way. I talk to myself. Do you guys talk to yourself? Somebody with their hand down, I don't talk to myself, I talk to myself. But it's about how you're telling yourself that you should be. Be conscious about how you're being. Pay attention to that. And tune into the people around you. Tune into the data that you're getting, the information, but also the mood of the group. And then listen. I think you don't learn much while you're talking, right? And if you must talk, it's a good idea to ask questions. So it's important to develop that awareness and actually force that awareness by asking those questions and drawing it out of the group. Next piece of it, if you're aware and you know how, you're conscious of how you're acting, you're conscious of how the group is reacting, is to start looking at what leadership style you're adopting, right? You might recognize this in yourself, that you have a kind of a default style of operating, a default leadership style. This might look like, for example, you lead by having strong relationships with people and they trust you, and therefore because you have those relationships, they're willing to follow. Or it might be more of a democratic kind of leadership where you look for consensus, you get people's opinions in, and then you form some sort of a way forward. But though that default style might not be the right style for the moment. For example, if you're in an emergency or a crisis situation, using a consensus building form of leadership probably isn't what that group are looking for at that time. They're probably looking for you to be directive, which is a very different style that you may not be comfortable with, but you have to adopt that more because they just need to know what to do right now. But if you did that all the time with the same group, particularly if they're a smart group of people, that would demotivate them. So you have to be aware of your style and shift it to suit the situation. And that leads on to understanding, I think, why you do what you do, right? What's important to you? What's making you act that way? Which is often called your values, right? What are those core values that are making you operate in this way? And you can have also group values. In Google we talk a lot about what are the values of the team, what's important to the team, what's important to the company, what's important to us, to inform then how we want to act. I think it's a difficult exercise, and one that took me a while to work through, is to really understand what are those values that are driving you. And often we give ourselves, when you ask that question, first of all to yourself, you give yourself some glossy, high-level value, like you want to bring goodness to all people, or whatever it might be. But if you ask yourself the questions below that, but what's driving that, what's driving that, you get down to kind of grungier values, like you want you want recognition or something like this, right? So there's something over there that's driving you to take those actions. It's really important to understand for yourself what's important to you, because then you can decide if you're having the right reaction out of that. And that's then gets more towards being purposeful in your leadership. Slides are all over the place. That. So if values are what's important to you, then your actions coming out of those values, how you want to act, should be based on principles, on rules that you have for yourself. It's going to be based on somebody's rules, right? So just choose if it's going to be your rules, your way that you want to operate, or somebody else's way that they want you to operate. These are called principles, right? And you can set these things out for yourself. Again, it's an exercise that took me a long time to come to the realization that it would be a good idea to do that. But if you have principles, if you have rules about how you want to operate, it'll make decision making a lot easier, because you can check your decisions then against those rules, against those principles, right? And that also works in a team. It's good in a team or in a company or in a non-profit organization to have the principles by which you will operate, because then you can check back to your decisions align with those principles. Are you on the path that you wanted to be on? It makes decision making easier, but also means that you don't have regrets, or hopefully don't have regrets about how you acted, either as a group or as an individual. And then in that decision making, some people actually say that leadership is all about decision making. I don't know if I agree with that, but if you are leading, you're probably making a decision. You're probably making the tough calls yourself or with your group. The Marines, the US Marines, have a saying, which is, it's a principle actually, a rule. It's called the 70% rule, which says if you have 70% of the data and you've done 70% of the analysis, you're 70% sure, then just do it. That's your decision point right there. That's when you make the decision. If you wait for 100%, you're probably too late, right? That's pretty extreme in the case of, say, the army. You know, your decisions are high stakes, but often our decisions are not that high stakes. And when the pressure is on, it's easy to kind of procrastinate and wait till you have 100% of the data, wait till you have more information so you can be more sure. But making a wrong decision is also often better than making no decision. If you make a decision, you can then iterate, you know, adjust your decision. It's rare that decisions are terminal. That's the only, you know, you've made a decision and there's no going back on it. You can usually make a decision and iterate on it, adjust course, as you get more information in and test your hypothesis and move forward with that decision. In the business world, that might look like a product launch. You could wait till you have, or you feel you have the perfect product, but then it could be too late. You know, there could be a competitor out there with a better product, first to market, etc. Or you could get out there early with a real scrappy, pulled together kind of product, give it to a few customers and observe them. Watch how they use it. Get feedback from them. Those two things are different. Feedback and observation of the customer. You're going to get two different streams of information. And then use that information to make the product better. And for sure you're going to get a product out there in the market earlier and better than you would if you had waited for that final perfect product or all the information to be in there. And finally, find the right slide. Finally, you have the vision, you've made the decision, you're going for it, everybody's aligned. It's really easy to get off track then. It's really easy to get caught up in the emergencies or the urgent stuff or whatever it is. Make sure to keep your group focused on the things that matter. What that looks like is keep reinforcing the vision. And you do that in little ways and big ways. You don't have to keep telling the story and what it looks like. You can reinforce the vision by recognizing people for doing the right things to get there. Celebrating, making making celebrations around quick wins or milestones that you've reached. That reinforces the vision. But I think most importantly, and Mary touched on it, most importantly, make sure what you're focusing on really matters, right? What that might look like is changing the world. In Google we talk a lot about changing the world, making the world better. It might be changing the world for a group of people, it might be changing the world for one person. It's having an impact. If what you're focusing on really matters, you're going to have an easier time of leading for sure, an easier time of getting great people on board to help you. So to sum up, make sure you're ready to lead, earn the right to lead, get the basics right. Build that awareness, and that just comes over time. That awareness of how you're leading and how people are reacting, and then how you can improve that over time. And then to be a happier leader, I think about your purpose as a leader, how you want to lead, and be intentional about that. And if you're leading, you're not getting there alone, so don't forget to say thank you and give credit. Some of this stuff is hard, if you've set out your principles and people are challenging your principles, or if you're going out on a limb with a big kind of vision, putting yourself out there, it takes a bit of courage, right? That's part of leadership as well. In those kind of situations, there's a good quote I heard that I'm reminded of from a French wartime author who wrote, "Life shrinks or expands in proportion to one's courage." And I think that in itself is a good thing to bear in mind when you're developing your leadership principles. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Simon.